Well, good morning or good afternoon, and welcome to IAP2 Canada's very first taster session topic. My name is Amelia Shaw, and I am the Executive Manager of IAP2 Canada and IAP2 USA. On behalf of IAP2 USA, IAP2 Canada, and IAP2 Australasia, we'd like to welcome all members to this very first taster series. So, we're doing something a little bit different. Some of you may have had the opportunity to join us for our monthly learning webinar, and we certainly hope that you have. And if not, hopefully you'll try those out too. But we had the good fortune recently to be working with IAP2 Canada's training committee. And they thought, well, based on everything that we're hearing, we know that our members want more training opportunities. But not everyone can make it to training, whether it's at the Skills Symposium or whether it's at the conference or whether our chapters or others are actually running the training. So we thought we'd try something a little bit different. So we went out to a call to trainers right across Canada and North America just to see whether or not they'd like to come on this journey with us. So, as mentioned, it is our very first inaugural session, and we're really pleased that Stephanie has agreed to come on this journey with us. What we asked our trainers for was 45 minutes of training. And within that 45 minutes of training, we are hoping that all of our members will be able to receive at least 3 takeaways. So something that you can actually use in your practice today, tomorrow, or very soon in the future. So it's a little bit different, as I said, from the learning webinars, and actually very specific. So we are running this as a pilot. We will be running 4 taster series between now and next March. So we really hope that you enjoy this new approach, and we'd really like to get your feedback. So please pop things in the question box. If you've got questions for Stephanie, you can do that as well. But before I go too far, I want to hand it over to Drew, and he's going to give you some housekeeping, and then I'm going to introduce Stephanie. So Drew, over to you for some housekeeping, please.
Okay, well, as Amelia mentioned, this is a special training opportunity for IAP2 members. So this is being recorded, and we will send the link to the recording out to you within the next 24 to 48 hours. Along with that link, we'll send you Stephanie's PowerPoint deck and any links to anything that she may bring up, any collateral materials for you. This is not just a training session. This is also an opportunity to take part. It's interactive, so we encourage you to click that little hand icon if you want us to mute your to unmute your microphones rather, and ask your question directly. Or, as Amelia said, type your question into the question box, and she will break in at the appropriate time and ask the question for you. So questions, comments, that sort of thing, very much appreciated, very much welcomed as we kick off this Taster series. And one other thing to point out is that we have a poll question, which we also encourage you to take part in that. Stephanie will be getting to that. And so with that, Amelia, I will hand this back to you, and let's get this rolling.
Thank you very much, Drew. So we're about to head into brave, honest conversations. And Drew, while I'm introducing Stephanie, if you could hand the screen over to Stephanie, that would be great. So Stephani Roy McCallum is the Chief Storm Rider at the Courageous Leadership Project, where she steps into the storm of high emotion and conflict and helps people ride it out to clearer skies. Steph is a leadership coach, certified professional facilitator, and a seasoned engagement leader specializing in conflict, high emotion, and controversy. She has facilitated conversations on 5 continents, engaging people in dialogue on controversial projects, working with individuals, organizations, and communities to transform conflict and create momentum for positive change. She's presented IAP2 deep dives on courageous conversations in Regina and Victoria. And of course, she presented at our recent conference in Victoria as well. And she's coming to Saskatoon in November and is one of the trainers for the 2019 IAP2 Canada Skills Symposium in Gatineau, Quebec in March. Stephanie believes that the world needs a new kind of leader, one who shows up, takes a stand, and changes the world for the better. Steph believes that brave, honest conversations are how we solve the problems we face in our lives, organizations, and communities together. So with that, it's my great pleasure to turn it over to Stephanie. Steph.
Thanks so much, Amelia. And I'm thrilled to be here on this inaugural IEP2 Taster series. So I wanted to just start, actually. I'm in Ottawa today, delivering this session from my home. And I wanted to just start by acknowledging that the land I'm on is traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people. And wherever you are listening to this, it's likely that you're on someone's territory as well. If you don't know whose territory you're on, maybe take a minute to learn the first peoples who are on the land that you're standing on right now. So I just wanted to acknowledge that as I got started. I've been doing this work for 25 years, and I think that more than ever, we really need to have brave, honest conversations. That the space that we are working in is more than ever full of fear and anger and uncertainty. And there's such an opportunity for us as practitioners in the engagement world to really deeply step in and create the space for really tough conversations that need to be had, to just close the space between us a little bit, bring people a little bit closer together. One of the questions I like to ask people when I start these sessions is, what made you say yes to a webinar or a training session or even a conversation about needing to have brave, honest conversations? And I'd like you to take a minute to just reflect on that question. You signed up for this Taster series, and to reflect on yourself, like, what's calling to you about brave, honest conversations? When I've asked that question of other people, I've heard things like, my mother is dying and our family needs to talk about it. Or, I'm working in an organization that I don't think my own values are aligned with anymore, and I'm really feeling that internal conflict. I'm deeply struggling with the outrage and the anger in my community about a specific issue, and I don't know how to move forward. I don't know how to talk to my partner about the next steps in our marriage or in our life. And the thing that always strikes me about asking this question about what made you say yes to a webinar about brave, honest conversations is that what people want to talk about is usually generated by a challenge that they're experiencing, but the need to have brave, honest conversations, it applies to our entire lives, not just to our work in public engagement or our work as facilitators or as practitioners. It's about our entire lives. Brave, honest conversations are a way of living. So just spend a minute for yourself and reflect on what made you say yes to this. I'm sure everybody wants to know how to do this better. No one's born knowing how to do it. But what was the particular motivation for you that called you to that? You know, there's this saying that your life goes in the conversations you're having. And I think that's true from a really positive perspective. You know, if we're having rich, deep, meaningful conversations with community and in our organizations and in our lives, we're creating connection and belonging and trust and relationships with other people. If we're not, we're also doing the opposite. If we are avoiding the conversations that need to happen, if we're not having them because they're scary or uncertain or we don't know what the outcomes will be, we're also creating barriers then between us and the other people in discussion or in our organizations. I think sometimes we think to ourselves, well, I'm not that kind of person, or I don't want to rock the boat, or I don't want to be seen as a troublemaker, because lots of times everyone's afraid to be the first person to say, I think we need to talk about this thing, this tough thing. We need to talk about discrimination or reconciliation or conflict or misogyny or whatever it is that needs to be talked about. And so we never want to be the first person who steps in. You know, sometimes we think, okay, we've got to have this conversation. So instead of avoiding it or denying it or being afraid of it, we rush in to have the conversation. That doesn't work either. If you haven't thought through how do you want to show up in the discussion, how do you want to be with other people, how are you going to approach it, that also doesn't work. So the not talking about these things takes you in a particular direction that, you know, distances you from the people in your life, from your organization and in your community. And talking about these things but rushing in and not doing it in meaningful ways, does the same thing as well. So hold that in your head as you're thinking about the brave, honest conversations you need to have, that your life will go in that direction. Really, it will go in the direction of the quality conversations that you are having. I love to ask these questions because once you've done some reflection on why did you sign up for a Taster series to learn a few things about brave, honest conversations, and what are the conversations you're avoiding or you really need to have, it really matters that you have a sense of what is a brave, honest conversation to you. I want you to picture, like, what does it feel like when you sit or you stand or you facilitate or you're with other people in a conversation? Like, when I ask myself that question, I think about, 6 or 8 people around a table talking about the really hard stuff, including the stuff that makes me maybe angry or fearful or uncertain, but still being with it, staying in it, really listening deeply. So that comes to the next question. What would be in your manifesto for a brave, honest conversation? What are the things that are most important to you that need to be in a conversation that's really meaningful and rich and deep and builds trust and relationships? What specific factors or aspects of a conversation create that for you? And then what mindset allows you to have brave, honest conversations? Because I think a lot of times in our engagement work, we focus really quickly on the things we need to do, right? What's our checklist? How are we going to do it? What techniques will we use? How will we set up the room? But in really brave, honest conversations, there's this beautiful dance between being, your mindset, your attitudes, and your behaviors, and action, the doing of the work that we have. And in a brave, honest conversation, both things are required. Your attitude and your behavior and the actions that you take. Both of those things are required. So Drew's going to put up a poll. Now, I want to ask you that question. What would you put in your manifesto for brave, honest conversations? I'll ask you to select one or more of the following. And if you pick other, I'd love to hear your ideas. So I'll get you to put them into the question box. So the most common things I hear from people about what would be in their manifesto for brave, honest conversations are inclusion. So inclusion in terms of people, the voices, and in terms of the views. I also hear about respect and civil discourse, like the ability for everybody to be in it together and working hard to hear each other. And then empathy, kindness, and compassion. So I'll give you a minute to answer your thoughts, and I'd love to hear what you put into other as well. What else comes up for you?
Thanks so much, Steph. So the poll is on the screen right now, so we're encouraging everyone just to take a couple of seconds just to complete that poll. And we are getting some others coming up in the question box now, Steph. So we're hearing honesty. Another is to take it seriously and be prepared to do more than just listen, be real and prepared to move forward. Strength, equity. So please keep the others coming into the question box. And while we do that, Drew, if you could please shut it down and we'll see what the responses are. So Stephanie, 67% said inclusion. 86% said respect and civil discourse. 81% identified empathy, kindness, and compassion. And we're still getting more coming up into the question box. So we've had honesty and candor and honesty again. So a lot on the honesty side coming forward. But I think that's it for now. That's what we've had come through. So back to you.
That's great. Thank you so very much. That's wonderful. It's really interesting to me, the ratio of, the highest score being respect and civil discourse. It kind of goes to my earlier comment about, the space that we're working in is so fraught with fear and anger and uncertainty, more so than it ever has been in my career. And I taught a course a couple of weeks ago, and I had someone at the end of the course. It was actually the IEP2 Strategies for Opposition and Outrage course, and someone say at the end of the course that What I had really taught them over the series of 2 days was how much kindness matters, and to see the results from people in this call, that actually what I was teaching the people in this class was how important it is to bring empathy and compassion and kindness back into our conversations with each other. And so I really deeply love that those are some of the answers that folks have given. So I ask this question in classes that I teach on Brave Honest Conversations, like the one I'm going to teach in March at the IAP2 Canada Skills Symposium. And I wanted to share with you a couple of examples people actually wrote up. So I said, write your own manifesto. And so these are a couple of examples from different classes. The one on the left of your screen says, create a safe space and keep it. Name it to tame it, which I deeply love, which is, like name the elephant in the room. Name the thing everybody's afraid to say. Step into the toughest part of the conversation and make it visible so people can talk about it. On that one, there's still also the shed the ego and embrace vulnerability. And, if anyone's familiar with Brene Brown's work, right, vulnerability is the path to connection, love, and belonging. And that when we show up with our whole hearts and an open heart, we can be seen and we can see others. And to create that space in an engagement conversation, especially about an issue that's tough, like I think about domestic violence or trauma or tragedy or natural disaster or, misogyny or discrimination, if you're having a really tough conversation where people are hurting, to create that space where they're connected to each other is deeply powerful. The one on the right talks a lot about being authentic. So instead of being neutral or playing a role or focusing on, often I'm going to put it in air quotes, being professional, actually bringing your whole self, your authentic self to the conversation in an open and transparent way, demonstrating empathy, integrity, and diversity, and then creating that safe space, taking the time to really have that conversation. So I think it really matters that when you figure out what a brave, honest conversation is to you, you actually articulate it for yourself. You get clear on, when I'm in a brave, honest conversation, it looks like this, which tells you that therefore, when it doesn't look like that, it isn't a brave, honest conversation, that there's something lacking and something else you need to bring into it. So over the course of doing this work for such a long period of time, I've written my own manifesto, and you'll get it in follow-up to this call. It's about 10 pages long, so I'm just going to give you the bullet version of it here on this Taster series. But in my manifesto for what makes a brave, honest conversation, the first is that you need to actually practice courageous leadership. And by that I mean you need to stand for something. The difference between facilitators, practitioners, neutral third parties, and leaders is that leaders believe in something. They stand for something. So for me, I stand deeply in inclusion, in compassion, and courage. And I believe in those things. I believe actually when I embody those things and I'm committed to them, any conversation is possible. And that's my stand. I can't get blown off of that because that's what I believe. And that knowing what it is that you believe in a conversation will allow you to be really powerful in what you're committed to. Work with the whole system. So I think that probably all the easy issues that could have been solved have been solved. We're left with a world of really tough issues left to solve. And I think we have a real tendency to go right to solution with folks. Like, let's get together, let's talk about the issues, let's figure this out, let's solve it in a really linear way. And the challenge with complex problems is that they're not solved in simple, straightforward, straight lines. And so just recognizing that there are so many different aspects and so many different issues and so many different human experiences that need to be in a conversation before you can get to the solution, and creating the time and space for that. Embracing the whole person. I'm a really firm believer that when we start with talking to people about the issues, rather than about who they are as human beings and what matters most to them, we lose the opportunity to really solve the problem that we're facing. So to put your emphasis in a brave, honest conversation on trust and relationship and courage and compassion, and then to step into the issue after you've done that, after there's been a relationship established, so that you're really talking to people about what they want. This next bullet is crucial for me. The recognizing people's right to a voice, right to be heard, right to participate, right to believe what they believe, and their responsibility to listen to someone else, to reconcile what their neighbors need if they're different than that, to recognize that things don't always go their way. In IEP2, we have core value number 1, which is that people have a right to have a say on issues that matter to them. And I think that's an incredibly powerful, statement or a principle. But I think it's insufficient for the world we live in at the moment. With the world that's fraught with fear and uncertainty and conflict, we need to introduce that right is crucially as important, but as equally as important is your responsibility to your fellow neighbor, to other people in your organization, if you're going to take brave, honest conversations to your family or to your life, to the people you're in relationship with, that we all have a right and we have a responsibility. So practicing meaningful inclusion. For me, this one goes to, that saying that if we're all thinking alike, no one's thinking. I think it's attributed to Winston Churchill. So for me, that means like actively seeking out people who disagree with you, actively seeking out alternate views, and not so you can argue with them or debate them, but actually so you can understand them. What might the other side or the other perspective need or feel or hope or care for? Compassion and integrity. Brave, honest conversations, they are messy. They are challenging. They're going to push your buttons. They're going to push your participants' buttons. They really are hard to have. And you need to stay in it. You need to really be with whatever people bring, embrace the emotion, have that deeper conversation, and let go of your judgment. Be as honest as you can bring your whole self to the conversation. And then, of course, to do it again and again. Nothing is solved in one conversation. Brave, honest conversations are a way of living, really. So just to reflect on that, you guys have offered, that brave, honest conversations need to be real and there needs to be equity and candor. So there are differences that you would add to your manifesto. But I just want you to encourage to really think through what makes a conversation brave and honest and what doesn't. Because when you go to create the space for one, you need to know that for yourself. So I keep using the word brave. And I had someone ask me recently, actually, what is brave and how would I define it? So I spent a little bit of time thinking through, like, what is brave for me? So I'd like to ask you that question and see what you have to say. Sorry, I'm just having technical difficulties there for a second. How would you define being brave? How would you find your courage to have brave, honest conversations? And what does it mean to you to be brave? I'll just give a minute and we can hear a couple people's comments in the question box. What does courage mean to you?
Thanks, Steph. Just giving people a couple of minutes to respond to that into the question box. So from Anne, doing what you think is the right thing, even and especially when it's hard to do. So that's from Anne. See if we can get anybody else. From Angela. Being brave to me is being honest with respect and empathy. Thank you, Angela.
That's lovely. It's really lovely.
Anybody else? This is a hard question, so thank you for it. Let's see if we get anybody else to respond. I think we've got a few more people coming in. I was going to say, okay. I think apparently we've only got 2 courageous people, but we've got more now. So from Cheryl, it feels uncomfortable. Get outside your comfort zone. Mm-hmm. From Miles, acting without undue concern for consequences. Do the right thing. Excuse me. Sorry, let me just get back to Miles's here. Now, of course, everyone's coming in, so it's flooding in. So do the right good rather than do what is done to get along. From Sarah, showing up and embracing the value of the conversation, even if the outcome turns out to be different from what you thought it should be. Mm-hmm. From Cheryl, however you choose to talk about it. From Michelle, showing up from your heart. And from Karen, dropping your power position. So those are just a few. Let me see if I've got any more. From Eleanor, pushing through my comfort zone. And from Sarah, speaking up when there is a power differential in the room or conversation. From Jennifer, doing the right thing and remain respectful no matter how uncomfortable it might be. I'll take 2 more, Stephanie. One from another Stephanie, asking for feedback on something you were afraid of or fearful of asking. And from Allison, be willing to make mistakes. Be willing to hear from others if they think you are making a mistake. Wow.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Thank you so much. Thank you to all of you for sharing that. You know, it's so much easier to say being brave or being courageous than it is to actually do. It requires your knees to knock and to take a deep breath and to really step into the unknown. I think I saw someone the other day wearing a shirt that said fear less, like the words were separated. And I thought, I don't think so, because my personal belief of 25 years of doing this work is that I don't get less afraid. I don't lose my fear, but I become more aware of the fear when it shows up and better able to work with it, to consciously step into it, to make a conscious choice, to be committed to inclusion, to kindness, to empathy, to the conversation more than I am committed to my fear. And when you build your awareness of it, then you're able to really step into it. I ran a similar conversation a couple of weeks ago, and I had someone say, in response to this question, that for her, courage was making sure that there is ethical space. And I thought that was a really beautiful answer, because that speaks to courage as well as integrity. And you can start a conversation, by just clearing assumptions, by naming the conflicts, by naming the judgments that are present, but to keep it ethical as you go through the conversation or over the course of an engagement process, as you go through it, requires great integrity, because new information will come to light, relationships will change. So knowing what is courage to you and to build your own awareness of that. It's like a muscle, just like empathy is a muscle you need to flex. Courage is a muscle that you need to flex. So I have I broke down for me, what do I actually do when I need to step into my courage, particularly in a hard conversation where there's a lot of emotion. So I wanted to walk you through those kind of steps, what they look like for me. So the very first one is that I take a deep breath. Like, I literally take a deep breath. I actually take a deep breath. The physiology of breathing in deeply and then letting it go, it slows your mind and your body down. It controls your nervous system. It actually lets you make a conscious choice to be in the conversation instead of reacting to the butterflies in your stomach or your knees knocking or whatever's going on for you. So to take a deep breath and then to connect to, why are you having this conversation? Why are you in it? Because it's a conversation that needs to be had, because it's a challenge in the relationship that needs to be cleared and surfaced, because you can't move forward unless you talk about the conflict. But to know what your own answer is to the why are you having it. And I would suggest, actually, if you don't know what your answer is to why should you step into courage, that maybe this is a conversation you shouldn't be having. If you can't answer that question, you don't know why it really matters that you talk about this. It might be that, sometimes we're all human.
What the hell?
Rush into the conversation so we can push back a little how much we're hurt. But that's not a why, that's a reaction. And so knowing what that reaction is for you. Once you've done that, once you've thought it through, then just go do it. There will be no perfect time or perfect place or perfect moment to be courageous, to have these conversations. If you're waiting for the stars to align and, you'd have just finished meditating and to have had a perfect night's sleep and everything to be great, that's probably not ever going to happen, which means you might never have the conversation, or you might never lead the discussion in your organization or in your community or in your life. So once you've figured out why, just go do it. Just go step into it. Hold the mindset of curiosity. Stop judging. You're not rushing to solution. You're getting curious about the place and the experience and the values and the feelings of the other person or people in the conversation. So really be thinking for yourself, I wonder what's going on for them. I wonder what made them say that, especially when they say things that you can barely hold yourself. When they say discriminatory or hateful things, hold that. Like, say, can you tell me what happened that led you to that conclusion? Can you tell me where that experience comes from, versus condemning or judging it? Because as soon as you do, there's no place for the conversation to go. So get curious and stop judging, especially those serious, polarized conversations we can find ourselves in. I have a coach and a colleague who says that this number 4 one is actually that a thing that I believe in, that about me, is that I bless other people's right to exist. And I think that's hysterical and way too grandiose for me. But I really think it matters when you're in a brave, honest conversation that you believe in your heart of hearts that other people have a right to a voice as much as you do, and that you are committed to that. And so that it creates a space for it's okay for them to say whatever they need to say, and that it's okay for them to be really honest about what they're experiencing instead of trying to cloak it or make it correct or only tell you a piece of it. If you are committed to the fact that whatever it is they need to say is the thing that needs to be said, there's possibility in the conversation that doesn't exist otherwise. And then last, my sort of process to step into courage is that brave, honest conversations are messy and they go sideways really fast. And when people are highly emotional, they don't always say things in articulate, kind, and caring ways. They can say really hurtful things. And so they shouldn't be a free-for-all, but there should be boundaries in brave, honest conversations, but they should be set with a really generous heart, recognizing that when people are emotional and they're in a high arousal state, that they won't come at it cleanly and articulate and in a straight line. So you'll have the recording to this, but I just kind of to walk you through, because the last time I had this conversation, someone said to me, well, give me an example of how you set firm boundaries with a generous heart. So I just wanted to offer that for me, it's like a bit of a 4-part process. The first thing I do is I get really clear on, here's what I wish and I'm hoping for in this conversation. So you offer that. I'm hoping that we can understand each other better. I'm hoping that I can know where you're coming from, that we can hear each other, even if we agree to disagree. The second thing you do is you get really clear on, here's what I am feeling. I am feeling that this is an issue people have really strong views on. This is an issue there's a lot of passion on. I am feeling like this will be a hard conversation, but I believe we can do it. I'm feeling tentative or hesitant or a little bit uncertain. Whatever it is you're feeling, to put it out there, because it sets context. It sets context for the conversation. Number 3, here's what I need for us to move forward into the conversation, not the project or the issue, but the conversation. So here's what I need for us to move forward. I need us to agree to disagree. I need us to be willing to really listen to each other, to ask questions, to be curious, whatever it is that you need, to be really clear about that. I need to be treated with respect in this conversation, or I need not to be threatened, depending on how heated it is. And then number 4, and this is crucial, can you support or respect the things that I've offered? Because you need the other person's commitment in order for it to be a real brave, honest conversation. This draws in that aspect of right and responsibility. And then, of course, once you've worked through those 4 pieces of things, you'll often find that you need to find out, what are they wishing or hoping for in the conversation? What are they feeling? What do they need for you to move forward in the discussion? And can you support the things that they need? That's what sets firm boundaries with a generous heart. So if you have questions about that, I'll just get you to pop them into the question box, and I'll just keep going. Amelia will let me know if anybody has any questions about that. Pardon me. I wanted to offer to you, sort of the step-by-step for brave, honest conversations. Because there is an actual flow to a brave, honest conversation that's different from other conversations, that's different from sort of sitting around the dinner table. There's an intentional thoughtfulness to them. So the first thing is, of course, to gather your courage and to prepare yourself. So, get clear on why you're having this conversation and how you want to show up. Who do you want to be in this conversation? Do you want to be calm and loving? Do you want to be brave and honest? Do you want to be assertive and thoughtful? You need to know yourself. How do you want to be in this conversation, and sort of figure that out in your own head so you're holding the right mindset. And then to be present and listen deeply, which means you need to watch your own reactions and responses rather than being attached to an outcome where you thought the conversation was going to go, what the solution might be, how the other person would react. Just let go of those expectations and be present to the other human being or multiple human beings. Sometimes my room are full of hundreds of people. Step back, see that landscape, see all the things people are saying, and then see the things they're not saying. See the things that relate to other issues, because of course, human beings are not issue specific. We create these really artificial spaces where we say, come and talk to us about this pipeline, or come and talk to us about this, transportation project, or come and talk to us about this land use zoning. And we think that they'll come and focus just on the issue, but they bring their distrust of your organization, their experience on the last project, their experience in their community, like they bring everything with it. And those things are all connected to each other. It's not just the issue you want to talk about. Be vulnerable. It's an act of leadership to be really open and question assumptions, and to be focused on the ability to create connection with the person you're having a conversation with and between the people who are talking. To, in my earlier example about the manifesto for Brave Honest Conversations, I offered the example of people saying, create a safe space and keep it. Well, a safe space is a space of connection, but that connection can happen even when people deeply disagree. So how do you create that space that makes it okay to talk together about really tough stuff? Take responsibility for your impact, the things you say, the things you do, how they affect the room and the other people. Use your skills and knowledge in service to the conversation, with more emphasis on the service to the conversation than the skills and knowledge. Sometimes we get a little caught up in the IAP2 engagement world, focusing on our techniques and our creative processes and our questions and our worksheets, and what matters more than those things are the other human beings in the discussion. So make sure that you're using your skills and knowledge in service to the conversation versus in service to the process. And then seek alignment versus agreement. We go really quickly in engagement processes to agreement. The consensus was people thought this. 57% of people said that. 3 people liked this option and 23 people liked that option. Focus on the things that people actually hold in common, and then use those things as a leverage point to other things, to finding solutions. But focus first on the alignment and then go to the agreement, rather than focusing on the issue and then the agreement. And then repeat. Obviously, the process kind of looks like it goes in a straight line, but it doesn't actually. Oftentimes you move around in there. And so core to working through the process for brave, honest conversations is that you need to prepare yourself. So in the act of preparing yourself, that's that very first piece of my manifesto for brave, honest conversations, the acting from a place of courageous leadership. You need to deal with your fears. There is no perfect time. You need to sort of lead from what life gives you and get clear on what you're committed to, that you're committed to more than your fear or the challenges that you're experiencing. Remember that it's not about you. Oftentimes, we get sidetracked by mistakes or challenges, or things people accuse us of in conversations, and then that kind of takes us off course. Just bringing yourself back to curiosity, to checking assumptions, to letting go of judgment, knowing why you want to have the conversation, and preparing yourself for discomfort and getting real about expectations about what might actually happen. And this last point, avoiding mistakes as much as possible, I think to get it through your head that brave, honest conversations generally don't go in a straight line. And I think if we could measure success by our ability to just be in the conversation and to stay with it and to be in service to the other human beings and to create a space to talk about really tough things, that's a success. Rather than, did we ask exactly the right question? Did we get it exactly right? As long as when we're in this conversation, we can own, oh, well, this is what I really meant, or I am struggling a bit here. We get, I think, caught up as human beings on getting it correct, and there's just not a correct way to be with other human beings when you're having a tough conversation. And so avoid mistakes, or perhaps own your mistakes, and then recognize you're going to make them, and how can you learn from them? How can they be an opportunity for you to really, contribute to the practice, to grow as a leader in this space? So that's my sort of how to have a step-by-step brave, honest conversation, and how to prepare yourself in order to step into the conversations. I'm just going to tell you 2 more things, take a couple of questions or comments. I'm really thrilled to announce, this is a thing decided yesterday, that I'm so committed to brave, honest conversations that I'm going to hold you could call it a gathering or an experience or a conference, 3 days of brave, honest conversations about leadership for brave, honest conversations. So building your own leadership in June 2019. More details to come. You can take the 1-day Brave Honest Conversation course at the IAP2 Canada Skills Symposium, and I'll be launching a 2019 training schedule in November, online and face-to-face training. Now, if you would like the step-by-step lists of how to have a brave, honest conversation, how to prepare yourself, and also some tips specifically to how to embrace emotion and gather your courage, you can just text IAP2 tips to this number, and they'll just pop right into your email. And so you'll get them directly right away. So I'll leave that slide up on the screen so you know how to access that. And I'd be thrilled to take some questions or some comments, some things that people are thinking through or wondering about in terms of having brave, honest conversations in your engagement work, but in your life or in your organization as well.
So thank you very much, Steph. Really, it was great. Thank you. I've had the opportunity to take your one-day course, and I'm a big fan. So I encourage everyone, if it's possible, to get out and attend one of your courses. We have a couple of questions coming in now, and we actually have someone with their hand up as well. So Eleanor, I'm going to be coming to you in just a minute, and we'll open up your mic. But first from Cheryl. And I think you may have already answered this question, Steph, but she was wondering that the tactics that you had explained seemed to be very much for one-on-one conversations, but she was wondering about large groups in similar situations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's interesting. So here's what I would say. The things that apply for one-on-one conversations, they also apply to group settings. So when I gave the example of, how to set firm boundaries with a generous heart, that's a thing I would do in a room with 500 people. So I would say, here's what I'm hoping for this conversation. I'm hoping that we can really talk about this tough issue together. I'm feeling a little bit nervous because I know there's a lot of different and divergent views here. What I need is for us to stay with the conversation, be committed to trying to hear each other. And my hope is that you can agree to that. So I'm going to ask you at your tables to take a minute and check how do you feel about those things, and then come back to me with your hopes and what you need for the conversation. So everything I've offered today, it applies one-on-one or in small group, but it absolutely applies large group. That's actually where the majority of my practice is in large group settings. So I hope that helps.
So thanks very much for that, Steph. So Eleanor said she's put her hand down, but she said, thank you very much for demystifying brave conversations. Really appreciated that. And from Sarah, I love this advice, and I think it's really helpful when you have the luxury opportunity to plan for such a conversation. What do you advise if you are caught off guard and pulled into one?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great question. It kind of goes to, there's never going to be a perfect moment, so you need to be prepared to lead from what life gives you. What I would say to that is do the first thing, take a deep breath, and then ask yourself, why would you be in this brave, honest conversation? How do you want to show up? If you can answer that part of the question, like, okay, I wasn't ready for this, but this is a conversation we need to have, or okay, obviously this is a thing that matters to this person or to these people, and so we need to have the conversation, then take your deep breath and step into it. But be really clear, you hadn't realized we were going to have this conversation, or you're not prepared with answers to their questions, but you'll definitely get back to them. Set some context for, you've caught me a little bit off guard, but I'm committed to talking about this. I'm just a little bit surprised. I wasn't realizing that was the thing. Set some context so that they don't interpret your hesitation or your discomfort as, anger or fear or reluctance to be in the conversation with them. When you set some context, it helps other people recognize that you're a human being. And then I would just listen. I'd get curious. Don't go to solution. Don't go to fixing. Remember that in a brave, honest conversation, we're not seeking agreement. We're seeking alignment. So just try and stay in the space of asking powerful questions, of trying to understand where the other person is coming from. And then feel free to say, okay, I'm so glad we started this conversation. I'm going to need a little bit of time to think through where we go in this conversation next. Be okay with saying, I'm stepped into it, and now I need a little bit of time to think it through. It's okay to set some boundaries there too.
Thanks, Steph. So we have 3 more questions. So from David, a question in regards to brave, honest conversations, inclusion, and discrimination. While we want to be inclusive and allow people a voice, how do you avoid having the conversation turn into a platform for propagating racism, hate speech, etc.?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I will tell you my view on this has shifted over the course of my career. So early on, I would have said, absolutely unacceptable, anyone saying any discriminatory kind of remark in a in a conversation in a group setting, I would shut it down. I am of a different view now. So let me clarify that, because I'm not saying I'm okay with hate speech or discrimination. What I am saying is, when we shut it down and we call it as wrong, we create perhaps, I'm not really sure if it's true, but our intention is to create a safe space for folks who will be affected by that discrimination. But in essence, actually what we do is not allow the conversation to happen, and to make the person who has those views absolutely wrong, which means we can't move forward at all with them. And in my view, our goal is for all of us to move forward together. So I have facilitated a lot of conversations about racism, and so I think I would, and the thing I have said before is, I just want to stop for a second, and I want to acknowledge the impact that statement has had on the room. So let's just take a breath and look around, and for the person who said it, take a moment and just look around and see what feeling it has created in this session or in this conversation for other people. It's created discomfort, it's created fear, it's created anxiety, it's created a sense of it not being a safe space to have this conversation. So then I would go to the place of how do we understand where we're coming from when the place we're coming from is such a place of judgment. So can we share what leads you to your belief, or what experiences have taken you there? I would try and step into it rather than shut it down. And it's a really fine line. So I really appreciate the tough question. It's such a fine line. But I think when we shut it down, unequivocally shut it down, we actually are avoiding the conversation. And I think it matters more that we step into it and have the tough conversation about racism and discrimination and other hateful things, so that we can move forward together, or at least understand each other better.
Thanks, Steph.
Thanks for the question.
Yep. From Sarah, what do you do if the other person does not agree to the boundaries and terms you have set?
That's a good question. So I think you have a choice then. Do you stay in the conversation or do you not? And I think you have to know that for yourself. There is no rule, even though we're engagement practitioners, that says you have to be in a conversation where you will be, yelled at, harassed, threatened, whatever it is, wherever your line is. So you have to make a choice, but you should make that choice consciously rather than feeling like you're forced to be in the conversation. And I'd make that evident. I would actually say, I'm really struggling to be in this conversation because you can't agree to treat me with respect or whatever it is. I'm struggling. And so what can we do for us to have this conversation? Put it back to the other person so they have a responsibility to help you figure out how to both of you or all of you be in the discussion. Because it takes more than one of us. Engagement practitioners, sometimes we take on the weight of the world and think we've got to solve all of this. Let's turn it back to our participants too and say, hey, we're in this conversation together. So how do we have this conversation then?
Thanks, Stephanie. We're going to do one more question. We do have more than that, but I would encourage people, if your question hasn't been answered, just send Steph an email. I know that she would be happy to follow up. But our last question is going to be from Karen. And Karen asks, how do you deal with being contracted to be an independent facilitator of a conversation, but the organization paying you doesn't want to have a brave, honest conversation, but instead wants you to have their back?
So I guess I would say that you need to have a brave, honest conversation with the organization. That's where I would start. And I would say that ethically, it's not a brave, honest conversation if you have their back. Just like it's not a brave, honest conversation, actually, if you have the community or the protester or the opposition group's back either, right? How do you be in the conversation in a way that means you're committed to the conversation, not to a particular side of it? And that's the conversation I'd have with the organization. This is your role, and this is how you can fulfill it. And can they be okay with that? Maybe set those firm boundaries with a generous heart. You know, here's what you're hoping for. Here's what you're feeling. Here's what you're struggling with. Here's what you need from them for you to fulfill the role. And then you'll have to make a choice. If you're an independent contractor, you have to make an ethical choice if that's the work that you can do. Probably if you're asking the question, you already know the answer to that. So have a brave, honest conversation with yourself, too. Thanks for asking.
I think that was brave to ask that question as well. So really pleased to have that. So thank you very much. Thank you very much for that question. So Steph, that actually brings our time together to a close. Thank you so very much for being our very first Taster series. To those of you that are on the line and that will watch this recording later, this is a pilot project. We really do want to hear from you about if this sort of 45-minute training works for you. Do you like it? Have you been able to get what you need? Has it encouraged you to learn more about the trainer? Has it encouraged you to go in and take the training sessions that are being offered? And as you can see, these are going to be happening across Canada in the next little while, and super exciting about your 3-day conference, Steph. So lots of questions back out to you, our participants, about this new process. And just to let you know, we do have an upcoming Taster series on November the 19th, and that is Facilitation Agility, off the rails but still on track. So we would encourage you to register for that November 19th Taster series as well. So again, Steph, thank you so very much for everything. Really appreciate it. I sincerely hope that everyone's got a lot out of this event. I'm getting all sorts of comments coming in, Steph, about it was wonderful, loved the format and the topics, super useful, great presentation. So I think we might have a winner. So I'm going to look forward to bringing this back to the IAP2 Canada Training Committee. So with that, we are going to bring it to a close, but I want everyone to know that we will be sending out a recording in the next 24 to 48 hours, along with Stephanie's PowerPoint and other materials that she wants to share. So on behalf of IAP2 Canada, IAP2 USA, and IAP2 Australasia, a great big thank you. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you, Stephanie. We hope everyone has a terrific day. Take care, everyone.
Thanks
Bye-bye
so
now.
much, everybody.